When a jury slaps Meta with a $942 million fine, it's not just about a big number. It's about a direct hit on how social media algorithms actively exploit children. On March 26, 2026, a New Mexico jury found Meta guilty of knowingly endangering kids and misleading parents about safety. This wasn't some abstract ruling. It highlighted how companies like Meta use defective design to create compulsive use, leading to real-world depression and anxiety. We're talking about algorithms designed to hook young minds. And by the end of this video, you'll understand the specific tactics these platforms use, and why this fine is just the beginning of a much larger battle for your kids' attention. In March 2026, a California jury delivered a landmark verdict, finding Meta and Google negligent for the defective design of their social media apps, ordering them to pay $6 million in damages. This wasn't an isolated incident. That same month, a New Mexico jury hit Meta with a staggering $375 million civil penalty for knowingly endangering children and misleading consumers about online safety. These aren't just isolated payouts. They signal a fundamental shift in how courts view social media's impact, particularly on younger users. For years, the industry has operated under the assumption that these platforms are simply tools, but increasingly, legal systems are scrutinizing the psychological tactics embedded in their design. The core of these cases argues that features like infinite scroll and dopamine-driven algorithms aren't accidental, but engineered to maximize engagement, even if that means fostering compulsive use among children. What this teaches us is that the legal and ethical landscape for social media is rapidly evolving, demanding new transparency and accountability from the tech giants. When your smartphone, that ubiquitous device in your pocket, is legally classified as a defective product, the implications are profound. Because on March 25, 2026, a California jury in Los Angeles Superior Court did precisely that, issuing a verdict that sent shockwaves through Silicon Valley. They found Meta Platforms and Google Incorporated negligent for the defective design of their core social media applications, Instagram and YouTube. This wasn't some abstract legal pronouncement. It directly linked the insidious design choices of these platforms, features like infinite scroll, notification bombardments, and algorithmic rabbit holes, to a specific young woman's severe compulsive use, clinical depression, and crippling anxiety. The unanimous verdict was a watershed moment, marking the very first instance a jury held these tech behemoths financially accountable for their demonstrable role in exacerbating the youth mental health crisis, a development meticulously covered by tech reporter Bobby Allen for NPR. The court ordered Meta and Google to jointly pay $6 million in damages, specifically $3 million in compensatory damages to cover medical and therapeutic costs, and an additional $3 million in punitive damages to punish their egregious conduct. What's particularly critical here is that Meta was found responsible for a staggering 70% of that total, highlighting the jury's assessment of Instagram's disproportionate impact. This wasn't an isolated incident. This trial, specifically the case of Doe versus Meta Platforms Incorporated et al., was a bellwether, a test case within the surging wave of over 300 social media addiction lawsuits consolidated under multi-district litigation, MDL 3047, which commenced initial proceedings in Los Angeles in January of that year. It begs the pressing question: how exactly do these meticulously crafted algorithms, driven by engagement metrics, target and exploit the developing minds of young users? What if the very tools designed for connection were intentionally engineered to create addiction, akin to slot machines in our pockets? That's the core of these groundbreaking lawsuits, including the landmark KGM Meta Platforms and Google case. On March 25, 2026, a California jury in Los Angeles Superior Court heard harrowing testimony alleging platforms like Instagram and YouTube deliberately crafted features, like the notorious infinite scroll and dopamine-driven notification algorithms, to maximize user engagement, especially among minors aged 8 to 18. The plaintiffs, representing a class of over 1,500 families, argued these weren't accidental side effects of innovation, but sophisticated psychological tactics meticulously refined through AI/B testing, designed to keep young users compulsively hooked. In the KGM case, the lead plaintiff, Kaylee Garcia Miller, a now 20-year-old from San Diego, testified that this defective design directly contributed to her severe depression, crippling anxiety, and recurrent suicidal ideation throughout her formative teenage years. She spent an average of 6 hours daily on Instagram from ages 12 to 16. Experts during the trial, including Dr. Alana Sterling, a developmental psychologist, detailed how internal Meta and Google documents revealed a clear prioritization of profit and user retention metrics, like time spent and daily active users, over the proven mental well-being of vulnerable young minds. The $6 million in damages ordered by the California jury, with Meta responsible for 70%, $4.2 million, signaled a profound shift. The legal system is starting to view these design choices not just as engaging, but as deliberately manipulative and harmful. This raises a crucial question. If app design can be legally defective and cause demonstrable harm, what ethical and legal responsibility do tech giants truly have to protect their youngest and most impressionable users? Just one day after the landmark California verdict, a New Mexico jury delivered another significant blow to Meta Platforms Incorporated, raising a critical question. What happens when corporate deception, not just product design, is squarely on trial? On March 26, 2026, a New Mexico jury found Meta liable for violating consumer protection laws, specifically for knowingly endangering children and misleading consumers about online safety. New Mexico Attorney General Raul Torres, a vocal advocate for child protection, initiated this aggressive legal action, asserting that Meta's design choices and marketing practices actively enabled child exploitation through platforms like Instagram and Facebook. The court imposed a substantial $375 million civil penalty against Meta for these egregious violations, directly addressing the company's long history of false statements regarding online safety for its youngest users. This wasn't about the defective product design principles we saw challenged in the Brandy and Robert Johnson case in California. Instead, this New Mexico ruling was a direct assault on corporate deception and Meta's systemic failure to protect vulnerable users from exploitation, demonstrating a much broader legal attack on big tech. What this teaches us is that legal strategies are broadening, moving beyond just product liability to target the core business practices, public statements, and the very integrity of these tech giants. But with a $375 million civil penalty, what are the true, hidden costs for Meta when these legal battles are just beginning? And how will investor confidence be affected by these escalating financial and reputational damages? How can a $375 million fine feel like just the beginning of a much larger problem? Because on March 26, 2026, when a New Mexico jury leveled that substantial civil penalty against Meta Platforms Incorporated for violating consumer protection laws, specifically targeting deceptive practices around child safety and platform addiction, it immediately pushed the company's known financial exposure in these burgeoning cases to nearly $381 million. Remember, that's $375 million stemming from the New Mexico verdict, plus Meta's 70% share of the $6 million from the California defective product verdict handed down by a San Diego jury just the day before in the case of Doe versus Meta. This isn't just about two isolated courtrooms. It's about the growing wave of social media addiction lawsuits, now numbering over 200 individual claims, consolidated under the ominous MDL 3047 in the Northern District of California. The precedents set by these juries, specifically treating social media apps as defective products in line with traditional product liability law, and finding companies liable for misleading consumers about the addictive nature and safety of their platforms, are effectively opening the floodgates for similar claims. New Mexico Attorney General Raul Torres explicitly accused Meta of knowingly enabling child exploitation and making false statements regarding user safety and the design of features like the infinite scroll, an allegation the jury clearly agreed with, finding for all 8 plaintiffs. The cumulative impact of future fines, damages, and escalating legal fees from these ongoing litigations isn't just a distant concern. It's a stark, immediate reality for Meta. The $942 million question, factoring in the initial $930 million demand from the New Mexico case. Are we witnessing the beginning of the end for Infinite Scroll and its psychological grip? But could these legal battles, with their mounting financial penalties, truly signal the end of features like Infinite Scroll as we know them? It's the $942 million question. While the specific $942 million fine figure from the Wall Street Journal report hasn't been explicitly detailed yet in our court records, the direct costs from just two cases, the $375 million civil penalty in New Mexico and Meta's 70% share of the $6 million damages in California, already total almost $381 million. Given the cumulative impact of the MDL 3047 bellwether trials and similar actions pursuing similar claims in other states, it's not a stretch to see how Meta's total financial exposure could quickly climb to or exceed that $942 million figure. These landmark verdicts, especially the California jury's finding of defective design in KGM Meta Platforms, and Google, could force a fundamental redesign of how social media apps function. We're talking about the potential removal of the very features designed for addiction, like infinite scroll and those dopamine-driven algorithms. This is the payoff. For years, we've heard the complaints, the warnings, but now, the legal precedents established in 2026 mark a critical turning point. Silicon Valley can no longer operate with impunity regarding the mental health impacts of its products on youth. Attorney General Raul Torres in New Mexico made it clear. Companies like Meta will be held accountable for knowingly endangering children. This isn't just about fines. It's about a societal shift, pushing for greater ethical design and transparency, and potentially reshaping the future of social media as we know it. These 2026 legal decisions against Meta are more than just fines. They signal a fundamental pivot in how we hold tech giants accountable. We're moving beyond simple product liability to scrutinize the very algorithms and design choices that shape our digital lives, especially those of our children. This isn't just about the millions on the table today, but about the long-term reevaluation of engagement metrics versus genuine user well-being. It's a battle over whether the next generation of apps prioritizes ethical design or continues the relentless pursuit of infinite scroll. Have these kinds of algorithmic decisions, or the push for endless engagement, ever impacted your own digital habits or those of someone you know? Drop your story in the comments below. For more deep dives into the economics and ethics shaping tomorrow's tech landscape, make sure to subscribe. If you found this breakdown insightful, my earlier video on the economics of attention scarcity and how companies monetize your focus is exactly the next thing you should watch.